So I want to help empower all of you to be able to recognize these things and hopefully do a little nutrition download as well. So maybe some concepts that you weren't familiar with and kind of understand why I got to use all of you as some informed consent subjects, because when you registered, you didn't know that you were going to be having your brain changed by the food that you were eating. So we're going to go on an adventure for the next few minutes, but I want to kind of just give you a little overview of myself. So I started out, I am trained clinically on the East Coast as a dietitian. I practiced on the West Coast as a psychiatric dietitian in all levels of care, inpatient, outpatient, residential. My specific area of specialty is adolescent mental health, eating disorders, psychosis, depression, you name it. There wasn't an issue that I wasn't on a unit dealing with. And then I do research in the Midwest. So other than not knowing what time zone that I'm in and kind of where I'm going to be, there's a lot of cultural issues that I've observed being on all different areas of this country, but there's also very poignant and direct things that we all can do, which is help people learn how to feed themselves better. And if we know how to feed ourselves better, then we can have a brain that's functioning much better. So now food, I essentially see it as kind of the center of the universe, not only because I love to eat food, but I think it's something that we have to do as human beings every day to be our best versions of self. The challenge is, though, is that we have this intersection between psychology, physiology, and also the environment. And not everyone's operating with the same deck of cards. You know, some people have biological issues that they're wrestling against, and some people have environmental issues that they're wrestling against. But in the end, the common denominator between all of this is food. Now, the thing about food is that why you eat what you eat is very much determined based upon your attachment. It's one of the areas that I'm beginning to research a little bit more about, is how those stories and those schemas that we have that develop very early on in our lives, how they actually influence what we eat. And then even more so is that the people that we surround ourselves with influence what we eat. You know, so if you can think back to dinner last night, either here or in another location, did you pace yourself based upon how fast everyone else at the table was eating? Did you look over at someone and say, well, they ate that chocolate thing, so I'm going to too? You know, so you want to think about how that these environmental connections that we have with food, that influences what we do. And we just, you know, Daniel just spoke a little bit about the power of community. That very much relates to how food intersects with mental health. This community that we have around us, if we have a community of individuals who do not value feeding themselves, that's going to perpetuate and continue to show that the malnutrition that is often accelerating these mental health issues is only going to get worse. So what I want you to really think about in the next kind of first part of this, which is going to be a little bit of nutritional neuro download for all of you so that we're speaking the same language, is I just want you to keep in mind that we all are very different in our brains, and that, you know, primarily the hypothalamus is the main region in our brain that's regulating hunger, it's regulating satiety. But whether or not your ventral medial hypothalamus or your lateral hypothalamus has a greater propensity towards taking food porn on Instagram, or whether or not you want really good tasting food, that's a very individual and a very biological thing. So there isn't one treatment that's going to fit everyone. And I don't want you to think that this is the sole answer for mental health. Sometimes my ego and my narcissism has a tendency to think that it is. But this is a common, low-cost, environmentally, socioeconomic, across-the-board treatment that we are not taking advantage of. And it is incredibly powerful. And I'm hoping by the time that I'm done that you're like, I am going to eat in a way that changes my brain every day. Now, before we get into that, I needed some friends to maybe lighten the mood a little bit. We're all hungry, our glucose is dropping a little bit. So I wanna have some friends of mine help us understand how we as humans really look at food. And right now, this is kind of how I see food, is like these intersections of all these different messages and all these different options that we have. But what really comes down to it is we have to have some agency and we have to have some choice. So my AV friends here are going to play a video for us.
The human mouth is called a pie hole. The human being is called a couch potato. That is the device to summon food. That is one of the many voices of food. That is the portal for the passing of the food. That is one of the many food transportation vehicles. Humans bring the food, take the food, ship the food, they drive the food, they wear the food. That gets the food hot. That keeps the food cold. That, I'm not sure what that is. What do you know? Food! That is the altar where they worship. Food. That's what they eat when they've eaten too much food. That gets rid of the guilt so they can eat more food. Food, 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 food! So, you think they have enough? Well, they don't. For humans, enough is never enough. And what do they do with the stuff they don't eat? They put it in gleaming silver cans just for us. Dig in! Good, isn't it?
Oh, wow.
And that's a diaper. And that does come out of a wazoo. So, what do you think? Was I right or was I right? And these things are just the scraps. Where do you see what comes in the boxes and the packages and the cans? I'm telling you, folks, you stick with me, and in 1 week we will gather enough food to feed a bear.
What?
Just a figure of speech.
That's good. So there's more to this story, and if you guys ever want to watch this movie, it's one of my favorite movies because it's obviously all about food, but it's called Over the Hedge. It was, I think, 2006, 2007. But the reason why I wanted to show that is because this really is the reality of our lives. Like, we spend every single day thinking about food, talking about food, exercising off food, but yet one of the things that I was very blessed and honored to give a TED Talk about is how we are not conscious of our food. Like, at all. Like, we are not conscious of what we do. We are reactive to food. We're like, oh, I ate this, now I need to do this, and then I need to eat this. But we don't take a look at our calendars and see what we have to do and then say, what do I need to give my body in terms of fuel in order to accomplish this task? And this is one of the things that I want to shift in you. I want to shift that there are no limitations in what you can actually achieve, not only with your brain from amazing technologies, but with this awesome body that we walk around in on a daily basis. But we have to have consciousness of what we're putting in our body so that it can perform to our biological and environmental capacities. Now, you guys didn't know, but we were going to have a nutritional biochemistry lesson today, but we have to. In order to talk about food, we have to go into chemistry. I love chemistry. I was that student who was like, ooh, more organic chemistry, please. And I'm going to make it practical for you because it is one of my gifts is to be able to translate scientific knowledge into fun things. And so I want to take you on a little adventure. So basically, this is the whole fireplace of our system. So this is called the metabolic cycle, and there's 3 phases in this. There's only 2 shown here, but we have the first one. Do I have a laser? No. Oh, there we go. So up at the top, the first one is where we take carbon, and that's what we eat. So every single day, when you put food into your pie hole, as the raccoon informed us, you are taking carbon in your system, and we run on carbon. So the entire purpose of why we eat is to take food, break it into carbon, and do something with it. That's it. Now, we take this carbon, and it goes through these phases. And so the first phase is where we take ideally a 6-carbon chain, which is mostly carbohydrate. There are other forms of carbon around there, but we'll start with that one. And then it gets broken into 2 3-carbons. And so that's that first slide. That's right here, to where we started with this pyruvate. That's the 3-carbon, so that's after the 6 into the 3. Now, after the pyruvate gets ready, I like to think of it, I used to teach my patients, is that it's going to go on a Ferris wheel, to where it jumps on the wheel, and when you're on a Ferris wheel and you're like super excited and you want to get on there, but you have to keep stopping and like putting the next person on, and then you're trying to gauge like whether or not you're getting on, and you're just like, can we please spin around? That's kind of how our bodies are. We keep putting carbon on and taking carbon off and putting carbon on when it really just wants to spin around and have a good time. Now, that second phase, this Ferris wheel, is called the Krebs cycle. And that part is where a lot of our vitamins and minerals come in. The vitamin and minerals is sort of these people who open the door and shut the door, and open the door and shut the door, and let people on and let people off. But if you don't have those vitamins and minerals, then you're stuck up at the top of the Ferris wheel and you can't go anywhere. That's the reason why we eat fruits and vegetables. It's to make your Ferris wheel work. Now, the last phase, which is the electron transport chain, is where after that Ferris wheel is spun, there's a bunch of energy that comes off, and then we take that energy, and as we've learned today and even throughout yesterday, we are electrical creatures. You know, Morpheus was right. We are really just batteries. And so what happens is that these little sparks come off, and we actually go through and we use this energy to fuel all of our body. So now you understand nutritional biochemistry and electrical physiology. Ferris wheels, breaking down, and sparks and batteries. That's all you need to know. But what we do need to understand is that we have a society who's obsessed with calories, like obsessed. And if I had a Tommy Lee Jones button right now, because I'm up on a stage, I would be like, calories do not matter. Now, what I'm going to tell you right now is that it's not that energy doesn't matter, but this fixation that we are a bank account to where that if we put energy in and then we go burn it off, that we're going to stay sexy and skinny, that's just not true. It's just not that simple. We are not bank accounts that need to be managed. We are human beings that need to be engaged in a world and understand how we engage with our society around us. So we need to not look at calories as something that we need to manage, but we need to look at calories as something we need to understand. So calorie is a unit of energy that is needed to increase the temperature of a given mass of water by 1 degree centigrade at atmospheric pressure. Okay, so what does that mean? So if you eat something and you were to put it into a device called a bomb calorimeter and you were to burn it up, how much heat would come off of that is your caloric value of that food. So when we put foods in our body, when we put a carbohydrate in our body, we get 4 units. When we put a protein in, we get 4 units. When we put a dietary fat in, we get 9. And that's the reason why back in the 90s, fat became the devil, is because we're like, ooh, we need to lose our weight, and we think we're a bank account, so let's get rid of fat, and then we have less calories going in. But the reality is we're now seeing the byproducts of that misinformed information, and that's not the way we need to go about it. We need to make sure that our metabolism is burning and that our bomb calorimeters are airtight and we are burning up everything that we're possibly putting in us. And the way that we do that is being conscious of what we're eating, not treating ourselves like bank accounts. So the question is, does food matter? This is the question. Now, as I had noted, because this is one of the things that I was always trying to teach, particularly adolescent boys and girls with eating disorders, is that dietary fat was not the devil and that it was not going to make them fat. And this was a concept that was very difficult to understand, and I find now, even working with individuals of all age demographics, it's still the same thing. We are still under this perception that dietary fat makes us fat, and it's just bad biochemistry. But what we do know about dietary fat is that it's a type of energy and it has a very specific function. As we've learned over the past 48 hours or so, is the brain, that beautiful ball of fat inside our skull. If we don't have adequate fat in our diet, there is plenty of research that shows that you will have cerebral atrophy. In normal worms, that means your brain shrinks. You not eating enough dietary fat is actually shrinking your brain. So we need to make sure that we're consuming adequate fat. Dr. Hiblin spoke yesterday about omega-3s versus omega-6s, and we can't get into the nuances of things, but if you understand this concept of that fat and specific nutrients are not the main picture that we need to look at, we're all as a society going to have much better mental health. Now, the big thing about lipids or fats or triglycerides or pumpkin seeds or whatever you want to call them to help yourself eat them is that we have 4 specific vitamins, A, D, E, and K, that are only absorbed in dietary fat. So these are very important vitamins. They help that Ferris wheel move, and vitamin D in particular has been clearly linked to mental health issues. We need to be mindful of that dietary fat intake is something that could be a variable why we're having some mental health problems. Now, why fat is fantastic, just because this is my favorite macronutrient, I want to explain that, is that our cells are made of fat. This is a kind of a big picture of a cell, and we have a phospholipid bilayer, which basically means there's little phosphorus molecules and these little lipid things. And what happens is that this is the structural matrix of our cell, but even more importantly, this is the composition of the myelin sheath around the neuron. And I like to think of the myelin sheath as a North Face coat. You know, if you go out into the world and you have a North Face coat on, you can do anything, even if you are in Alaska or Antarctica or any other coat. But if you take that off, you're frozen. And that is often what happens in clinical presentation when there is inadequate fat. I watched it where people are frozen. They get frozen in a mood state. They get frozen in anxiety. They get frozen in paralysis. And that can be due to the fact that there is no fat on that neuron, and that neurotransmitter cannot flow. Now, carbohydrates are just a simple and fancy word for sugar. That's it. They're not bad. We don't need to get into this as well. They are sugar. Our brain runs on glucose. Yesterday, we learned 50% of the carbon in the form of carbohydrates that you take in gets burned up by your brain. Now, carbohydrate digestion starts in the mouth. And so one of the things that I would always observe from a clinical standpoint is that people who had these cravings for sweets and things like that, often it was because the brain was trying to get sugar as quickly as possible. And when you get that glucose, that really refined sugar, tongue, right there. It's really quick. It's a fast access through the vagus nerve. So we need to be mindful, and we can look at kind of what your patients are eating and what they're doing. If there's someone who's, you know, now eating candy all the time, and this isn't normal behavior for them, that's a signal for you that there might be something going on with their carbohydrate metabolism. Their Ferris wheel might be broken. They may not be having enough vitamins and minerals. There's a lot of variables that you want to take in. Now, protein, as I used to teach the kids, was anything that walked, ran, or swam, or something that came from something that walked, ran, or swam. But we do have plant-based sources as well, and you guys are going to get a chance to try some of those, maybe different plant sources that you're not familiar with. But everything about our body is made of protein. We have 20 amino acids that sort of come together in a beautiful picture. These are our different amino acid piles. And I like to think of these as recipes. I like to cook. I like to have a good time. So whatever mood that you want, if you would like some happy mood or some sleepy mood or some slow down mood, all the protein that we consume goes in and makes these amino acid recipes. And so protein is something that we also need to take a look at, is that we need to make sure that the recipes are moving in the right direction. So hopefully if I haven't convinced you enough that food actually does very much impact the brain, we break it down into fat, carbohydrate, and protein. Those get broken down into the bits. They go into that Ferris wheel, and voila, you get electrical conductivity. So now, let's eat. Now, malnutrition, as I was noted in my intro, is one of my areas of expertise because I think malnutrition is often unrecognized. We have very unfortunate perceptions of malnutrition. We think that it's somewhere else, and we think it's not us all around us. But the definition of malnutrition is faulty nutrition due to inadequate or unbalanced intake of nutrients and their paired assimilation or utilization. Basically, that's all of us, because no one's perfect. And so we are ultimately running on some degree of malnutrition. Almost think of it as inflammation. There's various degrees of inflammation, and there's various degrees of malnutrition. But here's a really key point about that definition. I'm going to let you guys read it for yourself, and I'm not going to read it to you. Stop. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what that scale says as it relates to your quality of your health. It has nothing. You can be overweight and malnourished, you can be underweight and malnourished, you can be normal weight and malnourished. And this is one of the things that we need to help people understand, because if we move beyond this, we're gonna be able to see all of the malnourished patients that are around us and all how that malnutrition is negatively impacting their mental health. And if we can do that, there is a cornucopia of people like me who are amazing registered dietitians, and I'm gonna tell you at the end of how to find us, because we are kind of unicorns floating through the world, and no one really knows that we exist. But there are very qualified, trained mental health dietitians who want to help your patients. Our services are covered through mental health parity. Please use us, because we teach people how to survive and live in their world with food. So now that I've got you guys excited, I want to just kind of last piece of it is going into kind of helping you understand the relevance of this, is that your brain on stress there is a flood of glucocorticoids. There is a lot of cascades that end up happening. And if you guys are interested, because I know for many of you this may be new information, I'm happy to send the PDF and you guys can have all this so you can have these fun slides and go that way. But what I want you to understand is that when our body is under stress, we have craving changes, specifically due to glucocorticoids, that increase our craving for salty, refined carbohydrates. And the reason we want that is we want our brain to run faster, and we need the sodium to fire an action potential. It's basic biochemistry. This isn't wizardry. So when you want to have like pretzels and tortilla chips at 2 in the morning, it's not because there's something wrong with you. It's you're stressed, and your brain's trying to survive. Now, neuroinflammation is sort of analogous to like the festival of free radicals, you know, so we have all this inflammation, a lot of imbalances, a lot of different things that are happening in our body, but the only way for us to really understand how to pinpoint that is you need to have someone who's an expert, who's able to help understand the connection between food and the body. But what we do know is that the faster the brain is burning this energy, the more byproducts there are. That's not a problem, that's just combustion. Like that's a normal process of metabolism, is you give off smoke and you give off waste. So what do we do to need to optimize the brain? We need to increase our function without additional oxidative stress, and we also need to get an oil change on a regular basis. We go get our cars having an oil change, but we don't change our brain oil. We eat the same thing every day. We eat a bunch of things that are processed and fried over, but yet we don't think about, oh wow, I wonder if I should have some fish, or I should have some omega-3s or something, because we learned how valuable those are for the brain. So now what we need to do is we need to get out of the box. And we need to start thinking a little bit differently. And actually, the irony of the fact is that our lunch is in a box today, so it's kind of funny. But what we're going to do is we're going to focus on food, and we're going to recognize that the blend of nutrients and the types of foods that we're eating actually matters more than the calories. It's not about the numerics. That the color of what we eat matters, because we have photosynthesis happening, and there's certain pigments that we know helps our body in specific regions. We know that there's research that shows that lycopene helps prostate cancer in men. We know that anthocyanins, which is in that blue and purple region, helps with dementia and age-related issues in elderly and all other people with cognitive decline issues. So we know that these things exist, but yet we don't consider that it's really powerful. It's like in theory, but it's not really powerful. I'm telling you, it's really powerful, and we can do this, and we can go forward. So here's your nutritional warriors to pay attention. I have 3 that I want you guys to really be mindful of as you walk out of here. First of all, unsaturated fatty acids, we learned yesterday, omega-3s, they are absolutely phenomenal for mental health transformation. What they do, myelin, cellular integrity. But here's the keys for all of my clinicians out there, because I used to be a burned out clinician as well, is that you're going to have depression, dry skin, lanugo, which is that fine hair. A lot of times it happens with eating disorder patients, but also with malnourished individuals as well, and an inability to focus. And the reason why that is because remember, go outside with no North Face coat on. You can't focus on anything. You're all over the place. A lot of that can be related to fatty acids, and your food sources are there. You guys hopefully, and you didn't know this, but I've been feeding you omega-3s for 2 days now. I hope you enjoyed them. Now, last one, B12. B12, this one is very important. There is some literature coming out within the mental health world that strong predictors of psychosis is actually B12 deficiency. There's new research out, if you dig into it, of how that individuals who have impaired B12, it manifests as a psychotic episode. You correct the B12 deficiency, and the psychosis, poof, goes away. It's amazing. Look up the literature. And what you're going to look for when you look for this is all of the physicians in the room, do not do blood work for B12. Do blood work for MMA. It's the precursor to B12 upstream, and that way you're actually going to get an accurate reading. So it's definitely something I would recommend. It's a low-cost lab. Check it on everybody, and you will be amazed. B12 is a very inexpensive supplement to correct, and it has profound clinical impact. Now the food systems, and then I am done here. We have, as I noted, psychosis, hallucinations, memory decline, dementia. Geriatric patients are severely at risk for this deficiency because we also lose intrinsic factor as we age, which is the biological piece in our stomach that absorbs B12. Now here's your food sources. Egg yolks, very inexpensive, 15 cents an egg. Eat the yolk because fat's not the devil, it's amazing. And so it's a very low cost way to get B12. Now your last warrior is potassium. Please leave sodium alone. It's not a problem. Sodium is not the issue. Potassium is the issue, and the issue is a lack of potassium. We have an action potential that's caused from an influx of sodium into the cell. Potassium is what downregulates the cell. We as a human society eat half of the amount of potassium that we need. That's why today I am force feeding you a ton of potassium. Enjoy. So what you're getting is anxiety, worry, chronic pain, muscle stiffness, fatigue. A lot of that is a hyperstimulation of that cellular matrix. It's almost like a brain cramp, like you get in your leg. If you increase your potassium, those symptoms go away. Now, like I said, I'll send these slides out to you because I just get so excited and I can't bring these things down. So your doggy bag thoughts, because I want everybody likes to take a doggy bag away from a good meal. Self-care is vital. Think about food as a form of self-care. It's not something to be controlled. It's not something to be regulated. It's a form of self-care. And have a consistent schedule with your eating. No one wants to go to the Ferris wheel and heard that it was broken and it's off for 3 days. What? I came all the way to Disneyland and the Ferris wheel doesn't work? Let your body be able to have predictability with its feeding schedule. Within an hour of waking, eat something and stay on a schedule of every 3 to 4 hours. It isn't about calories, it isn't about there, but get that schedule going, and then as you get into deeper things, you'll be able to understand more. And then let go of the rationalization that you can't eat well. Stop. It's not true. You can eat well. I have had 38 cents to my name, and I have had a lot more money to my name, and I've always ate well because I believe in the power of food. Color, color, color. Lots of color in what you eat. All right, last piece, how to find me and other people. Here's your two websites, eatright.org and bhn.org. Eatright.org is the big dietitian network. bhn.org is the behavioral health nutrition place. Here's your website. You'll go there up to the top, find an expert. Then you'll click in, put your zip code. Where am I going? You'll get a subspecialty. You can see that it has behavioral health right there. Click. There's all your dietitians. So enjoy. Please use us. We love helping people. We love eating, and we love teaching all of you how to eat well and feed yourself as well, too. So thank you to the conference here, and I appreciate your time.